Illustrating the power of our question to shape the knowledge we validate, these scientists didn't ask, are blacks and others inferior? They asked, why are blacks and others inferior? Something that I thought was interesting in this ballpark, talking about phrenology, justifying racism, that never really gets talked about, was one of the proponents of phrenology was none other than
laytonicles.
What's poppin'? Brand new whip just hopped in. It's your boy, young laytonicles, back at it again with the White Fragility. This is a part of the mini-series that I'm making that is inspired by my readings of Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. This is a visual documentation of my thoughts and feelings and responses as I go through, as in close to real time as I can manage. Now, I see that obviously you have seen the title of this video, and generally speaking, listen bro, I'm at level with you. We've both been on the internet enough to know that whenever there is a video with a title such as this, it's probably going to be some partisan hackery. Listen, they don't want us to get along, all right? Those up there, those outside of the video frame, they don't want us to come together, bro. And listen, bro, I understand that last episode I was a little bit unhinged, all right? I was a little bit off my beam. Okay, so this time I've read ahead just a little bit. I've made, where are we? Annotations. I don't know if you can see that, because why put my fucking master's degree to use when I can just make free content on the internet and not even enunciate content? Awful. But Leighton, Sama, what is the format of this episode? Listen, yeah. What we're basically doing, we're basically ripping off of Hot Ones. We're going to start off with the more milder points that I've come across in this book, the just a little bit of spice. And then we're going to work our way up to getting to even spicier takes or responses. And then after that, I'm going to come in with some palate cleansing milk. You know, we're going to have some. That's nice and cool from the spice, because surprisingly there's actually some reasonably okay points in here, so that's good, because again, we're not doing partisan hackery. Our side is all good and their side is all bad. Awful. But then after that, we're going to continue working our way up to the spicier takes. So I just hope that you will come along with me for the journey, because what I'm saying, bro, help me to help you, bro. This will be pertinent to your life, if not this text in particular, the ideas emanating within it. As I say, this is a part of a mini-series. If you're looking to look at my preliminary thoughts, you can watch that at the end, because we're already on the roller coaster, bro. We're already on the tracks.
laytonicles.
In case there were any reservations as to whether when Robin said that all white people are racist, that she doesn't actually mean all white people, let me tickle your taint with some of these quotes. Page 13, she says, for example, perhaps you grew up in poverty or are Ashkenazi Jew of European heritage, or were raised in a military family. Perhaps you grew up in Canada, Hawaii, or Germany, or had people of colour in your family. Had makes it sound like that it's past tense, like they've died or something. Anyway, or had people of colour in your family. None of these situations exempt you from the forces of racism, because no aspect of society is outside of their forces. This makes it sound like it's on par with gravity, like it's an astrological, like it's a cosmic force, you know what I mean? No aspect. So, you know, there's no caveat of class distinction or anything of that kind. Listen, bro, if you're a cracker looking ass nigga, if you're a white humanoid, you're racist. Get out of here. It's 3 strikes and you're out, except there are no strikes. You're already out, bro. Continuing. She says on page 9, interrupting the forces of racism is ongoing, lifelong work, because the forces conditioning us into racial frameworks are always at play. Our learning will never be finished. I read this and I was like, I feel like I'm being preached to by a Jehovah's Witness. Like Robin DiAngelo. Mommy DiAngelo has just like knocked on my door and is like, can I convince you that your Lord and Savior is the white racial framework and interpreting society as a matrix of oppression? No thanks, Robin. I'm busy. You know, I've got things that I don't know. This is a bit too pervasive for me. It's a bit too absolutist, you know? It's like, it kind of, to me, extracts the individual's agency, let's say. Because it's kind of like, hey, bro, you're all just croutons in a bowl of soup. Doesn't matter if it's chicken soup or tomato soup or what have you. The soup is racist, okay? And there's nothing you can do about it. I'm so glad that me as a melanated person, I don't have the like white guilt of reading this, because I imagine I wouldn't know what to think. Anyway, page 14, she says, if you are reading this and are still making your case for why you are different from other white people and why none of this applies to you, stop and take a breath. Now return to the questions above and keep working through them. She said, if you're not singing from the same hymn sheet that I am, then you're wrong. There are a multitude of ways of conceptualizing racism and sociological forces of the like. And so this kind of like, well, if you're coming to a different conclusion, what you want to do is go back to where you came from. That sounds bad out of context, but it's kind of like recite back, because clearly you haven't read. It's a bit No True Scotsman-y. It's a bit, well, if you understood it, you would come to the same conclusions that I have, which, again, to me is quite absolutist. I'm not down with it. Personally, this is generally speaking emanating from a very small pocket, a very esoteric, elitist group, academic jargon. In-group, out-group, you're either with us or you're against us. And that's no good. Sonic the Hedgehog, 1997 or something.
That's no good.
Next point, or contextualizing factor. This one is simply written as post-constructionism. I'll say the quote to you, and then I'll elaborate with my thoughts. Let's go. Page 15. Many of us have been taught to believe that there are distinct biological and genetic differences between race. The biology accounts for visual differences such as skin color, hair texture, and eye shape, and traits that we believe we see such as sexuality, athleticism, or mathematical ability. The idea of race as a biological construct makes it easy to believe that many of the divisions we see in society are natural, but race, like gender, is socially constructed. The differences we see with our eyes, differences such as hair texture and eye colour, are superficial and emerged as adaptations to geography. I'll continue in a second. How she doesn't realise that she basically just circumnavigated her way around evolutionary biology. She just said that they're, adaptations to geography. Yeah, that's biological. This is like Darwinism 101, you know? What is it? There's the thing, what is it like? There's the four birds, but they're loosely the same, but they have different eating patterns, so their beaks are different or something like that. Their biology is more or less the same, but they have different circumstances that made them in the way that they are, right? Biological. Continuing. Under the skin, there is no true biological race. The external characteristics that we use to define race are unreliable indicators of genetic variation between two people. However, the belief that race and differences associated with it are biological is deep-seated, blah, blah, blah. I thought, and I tried to keep with my good faith, that at some point or another she would flip the script a little. She would say, well, when I say race, I'm talking about the ideas and culture that we think is emanating from a particular group, let's say. I thought she was going to do that, so I was scouring the page for ethnicity. However, ethnicity never came, and also reading back up the page, some of the things that she does isolate to be socially constructed are skin color, hair texture, and eye shape, which, if that's not self-evident to be a facet of a biological reality, I don't know what is. Like the levels of obfuscation, 200 IQ levels of obfuscation is what I'm saying. Let me give you an example of these biological realities that I'm talking about. As you can see, I'm a brown person, bro. I'm melanated up, bro. So, because my ancestry is such that their skin evolved in a way to protect them from the sun, that's why it's darker. And shout out to my lower risk of skin cancer. Thank you. But basically, as a result of this, it means that I don't take in sunlight as naturally as a fairer skinned person because my ancestors evolved to. No, son, get away. That means that I do not create vitamin D as efficiently as well as a fairer skinned person would. As a result of that, I take vitamin D supplements to close that gap because vitamin D is very important for a well-functioning immune system. We got there in the end. This is a biological reality for me, which is perfectly fine. There's no social constructing your way around some things. Some things just are, and that's okay.
You don't have to lie to me. I'm fucking
And then the next heading that I have is her definition of racism. Here is perhaps the tightest definition of racism that she has. Page 19, she says, to understand racism, we need to first distinguish it from mere prejudice and discrimination. And I read this and I was already sleep because I already know where this is going, bro. It's the same platitudes. Well, actually, racism is racism plus power. It's like... To me, it's simply a rose by any other name. Call it what you want. I don't know. Is it racism or is it race-based discrimination? I'm like, oh my god. Point, if there ever was one, overhead, like a high kick. Similes. Prejudice is prejudgment about another person based on the social groups to which that person belongs. Prejudice consists of thoughts and feelings, including stereotypes, attitudes, and generalizations that are based on little or no experience and then are projected onto everyone from that group. Our prejudices tend to be shared because we swim in the same cultural waters and absorb the same messages. This isn't necessarily particular to this excerpt, but it's emanating from its more abstracted point, which is the whole like, well, only white people can be racist because they're the only ones with power, which isn't true, but whatever, we'll go along with it. But within this parameterization, this conceptualization of racism, it made me think about, well, what about situations where white people are essentially absent? And I thought about a video that I saw on social media, and it was of 4 black men beating up a Asian man whilst using slurs at the same time. So racial component, is that race-based discrimination or is that racism? Well, that's my point entirely, because in a conceptualization where only white people have power and then people of color do not, who has power there because they're using racial slurs? Is that racism or is that race-based discrimination? And it's also like, does that make a difference, bro? You know, it's a bit word soup for me. And then I came across a headline that read, to perhaps hopefully exemplify this point of, we'll get there. The headline reads, How Asian Americans Contribute to White Supremacy. This was by Vice. And I'm like, inject some humanity back into, we need to bring back humanity back into racism is what I'm saying. I don't know. To me, it's a bit, that was a joke. To me, it's a bit like, it seems as though like some people genuinely believe that like white people invented racism or something, because it's like, white people aren't even in that scenario. How Asian Americans contribute to white supremacy. People can have their own prejudices and tribes that they belong to and exercises of tribalism without it having to include white people, if that makes sense. Let me put it this way. Back in the day, right, we thought that the Earth was at the center of the universe. And then your boy, Galileo, came along and said, well, actually, the sun's at the center of the universe and the Earth revolves around it. Heliocentrism. In the 21st century, to me, as it appears, is that now there's a group of people that believes that actually whiteness is at the center of the universe, and that's why they're domineering in all facets of life. Why is white people the standard? And in extending this kind of whiteness at the center of the universe, what is the acronym? Person of color, if not just a coalition of everybody that's not white. They really said, let's abstract all the otherized groups and make a coalition where their single defining trait is that they're not white. And in doing so, obfuscating all of the differences between them. As though like all of the groups within that umbrella are the same. Whose idea was that? Did the people co-sign this? Of course not. This came from the above people. To me, that doesn't strike me as empowerment, to be honest, to say that we are going to group you simply by the characteristic that you're not white. What?
This is a fucking nightmare.
The next point is I've just put down as colour blindness. I will recite the quote to you and then we'll go from there, broskies. Page 37. She says, to illustrate an early lesson in white racial framing, imagine that a white mother and her white child are in a grocery store. Gender normative. Where's the white father? I'm kidding. Okay. The child sees a black man and shouts, "Mummy, that man's skin is black." Several people, including the black man, turn to look. How do you imagine the mother would respond? Most people would immediately put their finger to their mouth and say, "Shush." When white people are asked what the mother might be feeling, most agree that she is likely to feel anxiety, tension, and embarrassment. Indeed, many of us have had similar experiences wherein the message was clear: we should not talk openly about race. To me, that's a conflation. They're not the same thing. Pointing out somebody's race with no contextually relevant reason as to why you would do so doesn't make sense. And I don't think that's strictly from like a white perspective. Like if I was with some of my black friends and for whatever reason one of them was like, "Oh, there's an Asian over there," it would be like, okay, and bro, you're weird. Again, like it's when it's contextually relevant. So somebody like pointing out somebody's race willy-nilly for ostensibly no reason, that's not the same as saying we shouldn't talk about race. So I don't think that was a good example that she pulled out. And then later on, 2 pages down, so on page 39, she pulls out some kind of generic phrases to exemplify what is thought to be colour blindness. Colour blindness, I should have said this at the beginning, colour blindness is the idea that for her it would be a pejorative. Like to call somebody colourblind would be saying that you're bad because you don't take into account people's race, essentially is what that is. So here's some generic things that she's problematizing as being no. On page 39, she says, "I judge people by what they do, not who they are." Another one is, "We are all red under the skin." Another one is, "I don't see colour, I see people." Now for the latter one, I thought that came dangerously close to disparaging the most important, perhaps, civil rights activist leader there has been, certainly of the past century, probably, Martin Luther King.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
So it came dangerously close to that. And then on page 41, she kind of just like elaborates on that entirely and like calls him out by name. One line of King's speech in particular, blah, blah, blah. The argument that she lays out is essentially this gave white people a kind of get out of jail free card so that they don't have to talk about race, which I can understand, because if somebody is kind of like, "I couldn't be racist, bro, I don't even see colour, to be honest," I get it. That's could be seen as a bit of a cop-out. I feel like there probably should have been a level of specificity there, because to be like anti perhaps one of the most important speeches, period, is a bit, I don't know, bro. Pick your battles, I suppose, is what I'm saying. One of the things that she points out to be problematic, the second one in there, she says, "We are all red under the skin." To me, that read very close to earlier when she's talking about like there's no biological race. There it is. She says, "Under the skin, there's no true biological race." How is that, in terms of abstracted point, how is that dissimilar from "we are all red under the skin"? That's like the same as saying there's no such thing as race. Or like, if there is a such thing as race, it's not important. Like I don't know. It's a bit contradictory, if you ask me, to be honest, bro. Generally speaking, I don't think most people care or want to make it apparent within conversation that they want their race discussed as an artifact, as a specimen for conversation. I think people want to care as little about it as possible, and not just race, actually, probably any and all immutable characteristic. And then elaborating a bit more on the colourblindness thing. I don't think it's always used in a defensive manner. Often I think it's a kind of like reconciliation or a recognition that there are stereotypes and generalizations about different races. And so when people say that they don't see colour, it's more so saying, I understand that those stereotypes and generalizations are floating around within the zeitgeist, but I don't apply them to the people that I see or come into contact with or don't come into contact with. For instance, my white mom has literally said the same thing. I don't know if it's ironic or coincidental or anything in that ballpark, but it was after we watched Get Out, which I thought was kind of funny. And I vaguely pulled her up about it, and I was like, well, it's not that you don't see colour. And again, she gave the kind of answer of oh, I just don't, people are people and whatever. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. And so I thought I would close out this section with a bit of a analogy, if you will. So, zebras, or if you're American, zebras are black and white. Wow, what a mind-blowing fact that he's just shared with us. And now, you might be thinking, the quick-witted of you might be thinking, why would they ever be black and white? Aren't animals often evolved in such a way so that their fur or skin camouflages them in some facet? If a zebra is supposed to be camouflaged, what are they camouflaging within? Because as we often see within nature, that's often a multitude of greens and yellows and reds and colours. You know about colours, you've seen them. Zebras don't really blend in with anything. So what are they blending in with? Well, one theory on that is that zebras are actually blending in with each other. If you can imagine for a second, if you were a predator and looking at a wall of zebras, you would probably have difficulty picking out an individual to target as prey, because they kind of just look like a wall. It's difficult to see an individual amongst them. And I think, generally speaking, that is in this context, a decent analog for most people. We want a community that we blend in with, and outside of that, we basically want to be invisible. I don't think, generally speaking, people want to make a grand show of their identity characteristics, let's say. Most people don't care, and I think don't want other people to care either. People don't want to stick out or have reason for scrutiny or any unwanted attention, let's say. Unless that's your bag of tricks that you have. It's oh, I'm this identity and that identity. And it's oh, get a fucking personality, bro. You know what I mean? Pick up some hobbies, bro. Start, what are those things where you sew into the circles? I don't know, bro. Do something, bro. Buy some acrylics. Get painting. I don't know. We have arrived at the section, the milk swigging section, the parts where I read them and I was like, well, actually, to be honest, bro, she's kind of got a point in this area. So let's jump in like Corbin Bleu in the 2000s. What a solid reference.
It's not soda, it is milk. It's not soda, it is milk.
It's milk. It's milk. There we go.
At this point, I've simply labelled phony science. She talks about during the colonization of America that scientists were given the task to find out or justify why it was okay for slavery to occur. So, she talks about Thomas Jefferson. This is on page 16. She says, Thomas Jefferson suggested that there were natural differences between races and asked scientists to find them. Illustrating the power of our question to shape the knowledge we validate, these scientists didn't ask, are blacks and others inferior? They asked, why are blacks and others inferior? So this would be as prime a candidate for inductive reasoning as you could find for any. Setting your conclusion first and what you want the result to be, and the manner in which you get there to be secondary. One of the examples that came to mind that I had for this inductive reasoning kind of race science, there's the study of phrenology, the study of phrenology. Phrenology, essentially, is the idea that you can deduce somebody's intelligence based on the size and shape of their head. And so, around slavery times, the idea was such that or one of the ideas was such that it was okay to use their labor in such a way because they're, what was it, like 3/5 of a human or something like that? They're not full humans, that kind of thing, and we can tell that by their head. Something that I thought was interesting in this ballpark, talking about phrenology, justifying racism, that never really gets talked about, was one of the proponents of phrenology was none other than
communist
poster boy and grandfather himself, Karl Marx. You know the one that you can't get through any arts or humanities degree in the modern age without coming across. That one, the raging racist and anti-Semite that seemingly for some reason doesn't get brought up whatsoever. Isn't that interesting? So I thought that was fun to point out. Your fave is problematic, to be honest.
I'm saving lives left and right. I'm like Mother Teresa.
Continuing on. She talks about a kind of racism behind closed doors. And the reason why I say that this is a good point is because, well, first of all, it's something that I have experienced. And also it's just something of like, obviously racism hasn't gone away. I should point that out too, because I don't know if it was super clear in my first video. I believe racism exists. I just disagree with the way in which she conceptualizes it and other proponents of this parameterization of racism. Anyway, there's a point where she's talking about a case study wherein some students were asked to document, to journal their lives and flag the racial incidents that they came across. So here's one of the entries that adds to my overarching point of the backstage racism thing. On page 48, this is what one of the journal entries reads. It says, "As I sit in a room with a bunch of frat guys, Phil walks in chanting, 'Rochi, Rochi.' I ask what that term means. I am answered with a giggle and a quick, it's slang for nigger, like Rochi." And I read that and I was like, if you're gonna be racist, bro, get your fucking bars up. Rochi. What does that even mean? I don't know, bro. I'm just like, if you're going to be racist, do it right. You know what I mean? There was a point, I was like 10 or 11 years old, and at the time who I thought was my best friend turned around and called me a Paki, and it's like, bro, I'm not even emanating from Pakistan. If you're going to be racist, bro, get it right. You know what I mean? So that's where my frustration lies. I jape. I am completely in the know and aware of the tendency for what I hope and think to be a very small minutiae of society to be what I would deem to be genuinely racist. I have no illusion about that. I would like to add, I don't think it's strictly a white phenomenon, and I know that it's not, because also when I was, again, 10 or 11, I was at like a bike track thing, or like a dirt track, bike track thing. You go around a circuit, and there was a point where I and a few other people were at the starting point, so to speak, and there was a black guy, and there's a few white, I think there was maybe other black guys too, black people and white people. And basically, one of the black people said, in a very disparaging manner, essentially a comment that was, the sentiment was being glad that there weren't any Pakis around. So even now, like 13 or 14 years later, it strikes me as like, that to me is strange, because I'm like, if you feel comfortable enough disparaging a race in front of another race, what makes you think that when you drive off on your BMX that the white people wouldn't say a similar thing about you? I don't know. Like, if that's the company that you think you're in, to me it's a little bit throwing another person under the bus. And maybe there's an argument perhaps to be made about like, oh, that's black people trying to get approval by throwing another minority under the bus. Maybe. But yeah, I'm just conferring. I'm just conveying to you that I'm aware that backstage racism occurs. Page 49. The researchers document that in front stage settings, open bracket, those in which people of colour were present, close bracket, the white students displayed a range of racially conscious behaviours, including the following: acting overly nice, avoiding contact, and mimicking black mannerisms and speech.
I came from nothing, bro. Like, it's crazy because
Just since I was a jit, bro.
How we doing, boys?
Hey, Mr. Anderson.
You guys want a ham and kale salad?
And then there is this one, I suppose, is more food for thought. I put it down as Black History Month. On page 25, she writes, "Yet the idea that racism in the United States can operate outside white people is reinforced through celebrations such as Black History Month, in which we study the Civil War and Civil Rights eras as if they occurred separately from all US history." And then slightly further down, she writes, "I am not against Black History Month, but it should be celebrated in a way that doesn't reinforce whiteness." To me, I think I'm somewhat in a similar vein of agreement. The idea that you're going to separate Black history as its own separate thing, as though it shouldn't and ideally be like disseminated within American history holistically. I'm not saying that we should get rid of Black History Month, but I think how it's propositioned in this kind of way of like, there's your time over here and our time everywhere else, does kind of reinforce the whiteness thing. Does that make sense? So it's just a bit of food for thought, you know? Don't cancel me, bro.
Hey, I'm an honest man. I'm here.
And then finally, I should probably talk about the credence of white fragility as I see it so far. I think there's some merit in the idea that like sometimes when you bring up race around white people, they get a bit antsy or defensive maybe. But I also think that the way in which race is being discussed in this very esoteric manner doesn't set itself up well to be agreed to. Given the like guilt by association, there's nothing you can do about it, you're racist regardless of whether you say you are or not. Because clearly like race is an issue, and I don't think it necessarily goes away in the sense that there was a clip I think a few years ago where like Morgan Freeman says,
Stop talking about it.
clearly that's not going to work. It wasn't working then and it's not working now. But as I say, how white fragility operates, there's a quote, I can't remember how it goes, but it's vaguely like, in an argument you can focus on being right or effective. And unfortunately, so far at least, I don't think white fragility is either of these, because I don't agree with its conceptualization of racism. And I also don't believe it's effective in persuading people to believe in its parameterization of racism, unless you're already in the soup and the Kool-Aid already. Because like, I'm not even a white person. I'm like, this is not the wave. This ain't it, chief. So, thus concludes the milk palate cleansing of white fragility.
デートに来る
Oh, his outfit's a bit different and the framing is probably slightly different too. Which can only mean one thing. Something went wrong. Let me explain. You're already here, you've already made it to this point in the video. Let me explain. Truth be told, I have the final part of this video. However, something came up in the filming process which meant that I had to film it on a different day because, surprisingly, this video is longer than I thought it was going to be. I got to the point in editing and I was like, this video is long enough already. Adding the next point on is perhaps like another 15 minutes or something, so I'm trying to help you, bro, is what I'm saying. Luckily for you, though, if you want to see that, or perhaps unluckily for you, depending on when you're watching it, you can see the spicier points straight away because it'll be on the end card for the right-hand side. Right-hand side? I don't know how this is flipped or isn't flipped. And if it's not, I'll make it obvious that it isn't out yet by putting a completely different video. If you want to see the previous video, you can see that on the left-hand side. Now, if I was at all hostile in the previous episode, hopefully that is balanced out now with me ending on some of the okay points in this book, you know, because we're trying to dabble in the world of the grey, despite the cover being black and white and the ideas within it, in my opinion, following that. And on my opinion, I should also probably clarify, the point of this series is not to try and convince you. But just by the way, this is, as I said in the beginning, full circle, a documentation of my thoughts and feelings going through this text as a cultural phenomenon, etc. In the event that you have made it this far, presumably there's some kind of worth or value to the video or what I'm saying, so even if you didn't agree with every point that I made, which is completely fine, again, you don't have to agree. This isn't, hey, I'm going to put together this intricate set and meticulously crafted thing, and if you don't agree, you're a moron. Love a subtweet. So yeah, that seemingly there's some kind of value for you, even if it's just my self-expression in real time or whatever, hopefully speaking as honestly and authentically as I can manage. So if you could drop double thumbs up. If you could drop a like, bro, and you know, if you're looking forward to the series and all the rest of it and you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. And also if you wanna be ASAP, no Rocky with, I hate that I just said that, with watching the next video, click the bell, because I've already had a handful of people be like, oh, you've started making videos again? Yes. So as I say, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I'm doing this series, this mini-series justice. This won't be the only thing here, by the way. The idea is to do other comedy-based things and maybe sketches and whatever. So, you know, if that's something that sounds interesting to you, if that's something that tickles your taint, again, consider subscribing. I hope you enjoyed it or learned something or thought of a different perspective or something like that. Again, you don't have to agree. All the other things, spaghetti spagoo. Yeah, thanks for taking a chance on me with this mini-series that I'm doing. Hopefully I can do it justice insofar as representing my thoughts and feelings as authentically as I can manage. However, that's the end of the video. Hope you're looking forward to the next one. Thanks for hanging out with me. I had fun hanging out with you. Parasocial relationship game 100.
レートに来る。